Hello and welcome to episode 86 of This Week in Germany. We'll be bringing the world to Germany and Germany to the world with news for the week beginning the 24th of August 2015. My name is Daniel.
And my name's Rob. Each week we feature stories from the news, society, and culture in the English language. If you want to find out more, including ways to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, head over to our website, thisweekingermany.de.
So let's get started with episode 86, and it's the week in which we've had kind of conflicting information about how many children are being born in Germany, isn't that right?
Yeah, so people do know that Germany really is kind of known for not having a lot of new people being born into it. And I saw two different articles from two different news sources today that kind of it's not really quite conflicting, but it was showing the story from two different angles. One was a story about how there's lots of new babies now being born in Germany for the first time in like a decade. And the other story was about how Germany really doesn't have and why so many Germans are choosing to stay childless. So it was kind of funny to see it from both perspectives.
Yeah, so Germany's not having enough kids. Germany is having enough kids. Well, which one is it?
There are more kids now being born in Germany, like in 2014, I believe, because the report was based out of last year in 2014.
Okay.
But so it was like the most kids that have been born in Germany in over a decade. But it's still, Germany is a place where people are choosing not to have as many kids as in other countries.
Yeah, well, you have kids. You have kid and you're having kid.
Yeah, I'm about to have kids plural in like less than a month. It's crazy.
Yeah, so why did you decide to have kids with your German wife and other people aren't? What do you think?
Oh, we had always planned to have kids, like from kind of like when we first decided that our relationship was serious. Like one of the things that we talked about was, kids were going to happen at some point if we decided that we wanted to do this.
But why are other people
thing.
not doing it then? Because other people are doing a relationship thing as well.
Well, it might not be as important to some people. Like some people want to have kids and other people want to focus on other things. Like they don't feel like kids are something that they need in their life in Germany. So they want to focus on either their career or they want to just be with their partner. And that is enough for them.
That happens more in Germany than it does in other countries. That Germany has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. But yet countries like the UK, where a lot of people live fairly comfortably, where it doesn't really have that problem. But we don't know. I mean, we're not going to work that out by theorizing, but we have a lot of actual facts coming up in the podcast today. What have we got, Rob?
Some of the stories that I'm going to talk about, there was a refugee riot that happened earlier in the week, and it was caused because someone defaced the Quran. So it was pretty big, and some people got hurt.
Yes.
I was going to say,
go ahead. Go ahead, please. Be my guest.
Angela Merkel took a trip to Brazil. So it would have been a little bit funnier if it happened on. I'm trying to work the months out. The first of whatever the 7th month was. That would have been funnier, but
why?
Because of the soccer score, of course. 7-1, Germany beats Brazil.
I don't think anyone would really be concentrating on that. Yeah, she's going there on a diplomatic visit, basically trying to make sure that more trade happens between the two countries. I mean, something like 11 billion euros of exports from Germany to Brazil. That could definitely be improved, and that's what's happening. That's why Angela Merkel went there this week. A very quick trip, only about 1 or 2 days, but very important, very important. I'm going to be talking about something else which is super, super cool, self-driving cars and trucks and how they are making inroads. They are making inroads in Germany. I wanted to use like a kind of a punny.
That is really neat that people that there'll actually be driverless trucks in the country and not like in the future, like soon.
Yeah, they've been permitted to put self-driving trucks on the roads. But we'll get to that later.
I'm going to tell you about how the Bundestag has another hacking story. It seems to happen a lot, but again, it just keeps on happening, and it is big news. So I got a story about that.
Okay. But shall we do story number 1 now? How do you feel?
We shall.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
story number 1 is usually the important story. I mean, other than German of the Week, or not German of the Week, Destination Germany. Destination Germany is probably the most important thing, but yeah, okay. Yeah, story number 1, the important story.
Well, we always like to talk about Germany in the context of Europe. I mean, after all, you can't understand Germany without understanding its relationship with its neighbours. But one particularly contentious relationship has been with Greece. After all the fuss over the past year, you'd be forgiven for thinking Europe doesn't want to give any more money to the country. But this week, the German parliament and others across Europe approved a third bailout deal, which will see Greece get 86 billion euros. Now, of course, we know over the past years, Greece has had problems with debt. And at the moment, it needs this cash, it needs this bailout money in order to be able to keep its banks going. And it needs its banks in order to be able to give people cash so that they can, that they can set up a business, or that they can just take out money from the cash machine in order to go to a restaurant or whatever they need to do. Basically, and there's loads of other things besides, to pay off people who work in the public sector. All of these kinds of things. That's where the money's going to go to. But they'll only get this full amount of money, this full 86 billion euros, if the country sticks to some reforms laid out by its creditors. On the one hand, of course, understandably, people are angry. That's because the Greek electorate voted against austerity and got it anyway. The fact that average Greeks are paying for the mistakes of bankers and politicians is also making them angry. Essentially, the will of the Greek people in the most recent election had nothing to do with the laws which are now being imposed on them. They said we don't want austerity, and then there was essentially a gun held to their head, and the people who lent the money said, okay, well, you can either not have austerity and be completely screwed over and not being able to afford to pay people who work for in public services or anything like that, or you change your laws to make them how we want them. Which means the Greek people had no choice. Very undemocratic. But on the other hand, how could you blame the creditors? When it comes to lending billions of hard-earned cash, you need to be sure that Greece can pay it back. So of course you're going to put some conditions on that money. But back to Germany. Germany's parliament approved the package this week with a large majority. But there were still dissenters in Angela Merkel's conservative bloc. 113 members of parliament in total voted against giving Greece that money. They were just sick of giving away Germany's cash. They felt they were messed around over the past year by Greece and were worried that the country might not be able to stick to its reform promises. Some thought Angela Merkel, Germany's chancellor, would be undermined by a small but vocal rebellion in her party. But as the bailout proposal was officially a suggestion of the finance ministry, she never stood up to speak in parliament. She never stood up to defend it in parliament during this session. So she got away with that.
I've got a couple questions about this, if you might be able to answer. Because of Greece's prime minister that resigned, what sort of assurances?
Sure. This is English, by the way.
Assurances, yes, assurances. Yes, does Germany and the rest of EU have that Greece will be able to pay back those debts sometime in the future?
Well, just a few days ago, like you said, Alexis Tsipras, the prime minister, resigned. And yeah, he also called snap elections, basically in around about 1 month. So it'll be September the 20th, I believe. And that's the plan. And because we don't know who's going to be elected, because there are discussions about can another bloc form a government before these elections would take place, is that even possible? To what extent is that? Can they do that? There's political instability. And where there's political instability, there's economic stability. And that worries these people who are giving out the money, making them think, well, if there's no one who's really in charge or who really has command of the parliament, then who's going to be there to implement the reforms or to ensure that these reforms are implemented? So basically, the people who lent the cash are worried that Greece won't be able to stick to its promises because it'll essentially be distracted by all of these political problems.
In order to get the money from the bailout, then Greece has a set of reforms that they were supposed to adhere to. What if they can't or don't stick to these reforms? What's going to happen then?
Well, I don't know if you noticed over the past few months, we did talk about it a bit on the podcast. Basically, Alexis Tsipras, the Prime Minister, Yanis Varoufakis, who was the then Finance Minister, challenged the current order of things and basically said, no, we're not going to do what you say. We want to get bailout conditions which suit us, which suit the way that the people voted against austerity. And he tried to negotiate for them. He tried to put pressure on the creditors, and it didn't work. So in the end, the country ended up defaulting, and it was messy. So basically, if they don't stick to these reforms, they're not going to get the money. We're going to see a repeat of what happened, and it's going to be more of the same problem, and we could end up in a similar situation where it essentially comes down to, will Greece stick in the euro or will it go out of the euro? So it's a very difficult situation, though we're hoping it doesn't get to that. But now the bailout has been passed, German parliamentarians will be watching closely to see if they chose wisely. If Greece doesn't stick to the reforms demanded of them, it's hard to see how there will be a fourth chance. But also, Angela Merkel pushed for this proposal. Wolfgang Schäuble, who's the finance minister, pushed for this proposal. Now, if they've given away billions of Germany's cash to Greece, all of these critics are going to be proven right, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on the people at the top of Germany's parliament.
And now for this week's News in Brief. This past Wednesday, 11 asylum seekers were injured, as well as 4 German police officers, after a brawl broke out in a town in Thuringia. It all started after an Afghan tore out some pages of a Quran. This was inside of a refugee shelter, and 20 of the residents of the building were very upset. All in all, there were about 100 refugees involved, and over 100 police officers were sent to break up the fighting. When the police arrived on the scene, some of the refugees turned on them and started throwing rocks. Several of the police officers were hit, as well as police vehicles. There was some possible talk about closing down the shelter, but this has now been ruled out. Policymakers are looking how to fix the original problem, which is overcrowding in this refugee shelter and others. Due to the influx of refugees coming to Germany, the country is looking for a new method of trying to control the amount of people applying for asylum. One of those methods is trying to dissuade many from the Balkan countries of making the trip in the first place. The government migration agency has started purchasing advertising space in print newspapers as well as online ads to try and let possible refugees know that they might be turned away in advance, and it might not be worth making the trip in the first place. This is mostly being directed from those coming from the West Balkans. Video ads showing people arriving in Germany only to be turned away have been produced. This is to let would-be economic refugees know what would happen if they showed up in Germany preparing to start a life here. Figures are showing that about 40% of refugees in Germany presently are from the Balkan states. Most of these people will not be granted asylum in Germany and will be forced to return to their country of origin. Germany is trying to make it clear to would-be migrants that they are only accepting political refugees as opposed to economic refugees. Last week, German Chancellor Angela Merkel took a trip to Brazil to meet with her president and other government members. She, as well as Frank-Walter Steinmeier, were there to discuss issues such as climate change and internet security. Merkel had been praising Brazil's efforts to save the rainforest lands and said Brazil has been making ambitious developments into the environmental front. Brazil is Latin America's largest economy, and Germany wants to keep their ties strong together. Merkel said that Brazil is Germany's most important ally in the region. The Bundestag's computer system is set to be turned off or go dark for multiple days due to yet another hacking attack. Though at this time, no word on who these attackers might be. It was reported that hackers had infiltrated the Bundestag's computer system and added a virus to collect information. The system has been shut down over this past weekend for security updates and is planned to be back up on Monday morning. Did you know that there's a law in Germany, at least where I live, that the cheapest drink on a menu in a restaurant can't be alcoholic? This is because beer is often less expensive than water here. But this could be changing in the future, as a change in climate might be the cause of rise in beer prices. After the Green Party commissioned a study on climate change in Germany up until 2050, one of the results was that the growing of hops, a main ingredient in the making of beer, could be negatively affected. Because of the upcoming extreme weather events, such as an increase of rain or the ever-growing hotter temperatures in the country, the crops for beer could be lessened, causing a shortage, which would make it likely for an increase in the selling price.
Personally, I can think of nothing cooler than our story 2. Self-driving vehicles. German carmaker Daimler has got permission to test its self-driving trucks on Germany's roads. No longer will self-driving tech just be for Silicon Valley, or worse, a distant dream of the future. On Friday, the company was given permission to drive through its home state of Baden-Württemberg. The vehicles will have to have someone on board in case of a failure in the technology, but most of the time the 18-wheelers will drive themselves. Daimler is a German company, but it's already tested self-driving trucks in the USA. Self-driving trucks and cars would revolutionize life in Germany. Imagine if you want to drive to work. All you have to do is press a button and the car would arrive at your home. You get inside and it takes you to work just like a taxi. You get out and then that car moves on to the next customer. Over 90% of the life of an average car is spent parked doing nothing. Now, cars could be really efficient and useful. Plus, you would see clearer streets. No more cars parked in the road. These self-driving cars would park themselves in a hub outside the city when they're not picking up passengers. Some people will still want to drive themselves, but the cost of a self-driving car would be much cheaper, as several people would share the costs of one car. But surely this tech would be just as important for other countries too. Does Germany play a special role? Well, put it this way, Germany has a lot to lose. The country makes 200 billion euros a year from making cars, and several of the top car companies in the world are based here, including Daimler, BMW and Volkswagen. The future of self-driving tech might be fusing Google's software with BMW's manufacturing skills, for example. But if fewer people will buy a car just for themselves, then the future has to be in software as well as hardware. Basically, Germany is at risk of having its car industry wiped out by America's automated vehicles. That's why the news that Daimler can now test its trucks on its home ground is very welcome. But more has to be done. The big step will be when a driver to monitor the truck is no longer required. So when the tech is ready and no driver is needed, logistics companies will see the advantage of going fully automatic. They'll pay for the trucks, they'll invest in the technology, and therefore more will be made and it'll spread across the country and, of course, across Europe and the world. Though, keep this in mind. As travel becomes more automated, we have to ask ourselves, where will the taxi drivers and truck drivers work? Now, of course, historically, industries have been wiped out before, and then the future workers found employment in different areas. But all aspects of our lives are starting to benefit from automation. So where does it end? And how will Germany look in the future when much of our work is made easier by machines? Essentially meaning a lot of people will be out of work in order to make life easier for us.
And coming up right now, Destination Germany, where we're taking you on a journey somewhere in the country that we think is well worth a visit. Whether you're a tourist or a permanent resident, foreigner, or a German citizen. Here, we'll be covering the famous sites as well as some of those little-known corners of Deutschland. And all that matters is showing you that Germany is an interesting and exciting place to visit. Also, if you enjoyed the destinations that we talk about each week, you have to go to our website, thisweekingermany.de, so you can see some of the photos to match what you just heard.
And we had a special Destination Germany last week. Not to say that all the other ones aren't so special, but we told you about a few events coming up in the near future that you might want to check out. So we looked at the Museum Embankment Festival in Frankfurt that draws over 1 million visitors each year with special museum exhibitions, fanfare along the river, and a glorious fireworks display. Starting in September in Berlin is the Game Science Center's Touch the Future show. Learn and interact with video games like you have never done before. And in Dusseldorf, we talked about the upcoming Old Town Autumn Festival. It's a city festival that goes beyond the fairgrounds, and the entire city takes part in showing off what Dusseldorf has to offer. So, where are we going to this week, Rob?
This week I found something really neat that I've added to my ever-growing must visit this place when I am in the city list. We're going to Dresden, the capital city of Saxony, and we're going to look at some amazing buildings, landscape, and we're going to see what's inside of them as well. Have you ever heard of Der Zwinger or the Simper Gallery?
I know of them, but that's about it. So why don't you lay it down for us? Tell us about Der Zwinger and or, as you wish, not trying to impose anything on you, die Semper Gallery.
Okay, well, obviously, as I said before, both of them are in the city of Dresden. The Zwinger is a huge palace, and it's made up of, it's kind of like a large complex of buildings that surround a pretty luxurious garden center, or like a hof or a courtyard that's inside of it. It's said that it's one of the most magnificent Baroque-style buildings in all of Germany, and that's one of the biggest reasons that I personally want to see it.
And what does this palace look like?
First, picture like an oval, and this is the shape of the land.
Yes, I've got the
Okay.
oval in my mind. Yes, yes. Next,
the land is in the shape of an oval, and the palace is within that, and it's kind of like a rectangle with two circles on the end. So it's kind of like an oval with square sides, and there used to be a moat there as well, but the moat is kind of like filled in, but then it's been remade, so there's kind of like an L-shaped moat that's in kind of like a wooded area that is around the palace. And inside the palace complex is where the Zwinger courtyard gardens are.
And what if someone doesn't, if they can't picture a oval with a rectangle with two circles on the end in their minds, where can they go to see this? They can go to thisweekingermany.de and look at the gallery, right? That's what I was trying to get to.
Oh, yeah, well, they could definitely do that.
Yeah. Well, of course. But I know you're going to tell us about the palace itself and the Semper Gallery, but what can you tell us about the garden before we get into the buildings?
Oh, the garden. It's like not quite the flowery and colorful gardens that we've talked about, some of those type of gardens in the past. This is kind of like a wide open space with some shortcut grass and walking paths between the different buildings. And in the center, there's kind of like 4 different shallow pools there. But the crown jewel, or the crowning jewel of the garden, is a beautiful fountain called the Nymphenbad. And it's a large fountain that comes off one at the side of the walls, and water just cascades down from the top to the bottom, moving around this Baroque sculpture masterpiece.
Why is it called the Nymphenbad?
It received its name because there are nymph figurines all over the fountain. And you really have to check out pictures to see how cool this is. Or see it up close in person, of course, is what I want to do. That would definitely be optimal.
Yes, of course. Let's move on to the rest of the palace now.
Okay, to get the real history of this, I'm going to let you see it or hear about it on tour when you visit it, but I will give you a rundown of what it's all about. The name Zwinger is from medieval German, and it means fortification between the outer wall and the inner wall, or the inner defensive city walls. So it's kind of like before a palace, it was kind of a fortress. And as it's no longer used for military defense, then it's now a museum complex. And it has 3 different museums in it. The Gallery of Old Masters, which is a lot of different paintings. I'll tell you about that in a minute. The Royal Cabinet of Mathematical and Physical Instruments. And the Dresden Porcelain Collection.
Wow, what a mix. That sounds really interesting. So maybe you could give us a glimpse of these museums.
Okay, the Old Masters Gallery is inside the Semper Gallery building, and it has paintings from like the 15th to 18th centuries, and it's mostly from the Italian Renaissance. And they also have some well-known artists from Dutch, Flemish, German, French, and Spanish painters. The Royal Cabinet of Mathematical and Physical Instruments is filled with historic clocks, globes, astronomical, optical, and geodetic devices. And
geodetic, I like that word.
Yes. To measure Earth sciences. And it has things about how people measured length, mass, temperature, and air pressure. And they're not modern. So these devices go back to the 16th century. So you can be amazed at the math and science being discovered during these times.
Well, don't think I'm not listening. I've seen you. You've missed out one thing: the porcelain collection. You didn't tell me about the porcelain collection. But you tell me about that.
Okay,
I love porcelain. It's my favorite.
The porcelain collection is actually why I chose this destination, because I was originally looking at the Japanese palace or Schloss, or the Japanese palace that they
Japanese
also
palace,
have. In Dresden, but unfortunately, it's under renovation. This is where so the Japanese palace is where the porcelain collection used to be held, but it's under renovation for the next couple months. So I'm going to put that on hold, and I'll tell you about that in a later destination, Germany, because the Japanese palace looks really cool as well. But the city's porcelain collection is known worldwide and features over 20,000 artifacts. It was founded back in 1715, and it's really a lot of Asian-inspired art. It mostly consists of Chinese and Japanese porcelain, and even pieces from the Ming dynasty. One of the most popular exhibits they have is the dragon vases, which I'll have some pictures up. They look really cool.
Nice. The Zwinger and Semper Gallery sound really, really cool, and so we encourage you to check it out when you can enjoy this destination in Germany. And like all of our destinations, as Rob just said, if you want some great photos, you can and get a feel for these places, you can go to our website, thisweekingermany.de, where we will have some for you there. But now, time to move on to our German of the Week section, where we put a spotlight on a prominent person from this week's news who could be a German citizen, or even a foreigner who we deem an honorary German, who's had an effect, for better or worse, on German culture, society, or politics.
Our German of the Week this episode won't know he's being acknowledged, as he has actually been dead for 5 years now. Christoph Schlingensief, a German artist as well as director, died of lung cancer in Berlin August 21st, 2010, at the young age of 49. Christoph is our German of the Week this episode, not because of all that he has accomplished while he was alive, but for what he has now accomplished even after his death. He has decided to make a difference in developing nations, and it took him to the country of Burkina Faso in Africa, where he built an opera house. Wanting to do more, Christoph also started plans to build a school and a theater in the country, though it was cut short by his death. His dreams have now been made a reality, as the school is up and running.
So that brings us gently to the end of episode number 86. So remember to check out our website, thisweekingermany.de, where you can donate some money to us to help us with server and domain costs. Would be really, really nice of you. And also you can check out Twitter and Facebook. All of the links are on our website in the sidebar, which is very, very nice. So, Rob, you enjoyed this week's show, right?
It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because otherwise I'd ask you, why did you make it that way if you didn't like it? So, yes, This Week in Germany is produced by me, Daniel Winter. It is written and presented by myself and Rob Bishop. Rob, would you like to sign us off for the week?
Okay, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back in 7 days with more This Week in Germany.